Hi, I'm Ken. I'm in the products team here at Geocortex, and today we're going to look at some of the performance improvements that have been made in the Geocortex Workflow product compared to how it used to be done in Essentials. Let's get started.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick look at a workflow here. I've got two different versions of it. I've got the workflow in Essentials on your left and the Geocortex Workflow on your right, and they're both doing the same thing really, just in the different technologies. We're going to be getting some sample data from a map service, and then we're going to find the largest census tract. So we're loading a number of features. We're going to iterate through them and compare them and find the one with the largest area and then show an alert. So fairly straightforward example just to kind of show you something that can be impacted by the way these work in terms of performance. Before I show you them, I just want to talk briefly about the difference between how they actually work. So when workflows in Geocortex Essentials, it's all run on the server, and the browser is really just sending a request to the server, getting back a response, and then sending a next request, and back and forth for pretty much every step in the workflow. Now there are a few minor exceptions to this. Form rendering is all done in the client, and when you're selecting things on the map, that's also done in the client, but everything else is happening on the server. So there's a lot of this chatty traffic back and forward, and sometimes this can get quite big because the state of the workflow has to be persisted. It has to remember what's all been done. So if you have things like variables or feature sets, then that whole thing can be ended up going back and forward every time. Now there are ways to mitigate this, but it's not really obvious to average workflow authors as you're starting to learn this stuff to begin with. For example, you can scope variables to only be used by certain sequences. And you can also use client parallel to allow you to batch client tasks, reducing the overall number of round trips. But these are quite advanced tricks, and I really wanted to make it easier to get good performance right from the start. And so that's where Geocortex Workflow comes in. One of the main differences with it is that everything is run in the client, so you don't really need to worry about the scope of your variables or things like that, because we're not sending that stuff to the server. There are still a few things that can only be done in the server, like database stuff and file access, things like that. And those kind of things, you can create a server workflow and you can run it from your regular client workflow. So it is still possible to achieve that sort of thing, but only where it's absolutely necessary. So let's just take a quick comparison between the two here. You can see we've got a display form. This really shows you a simple form explaining what the workflow is about to do. We're going to find the largest census tract. And then after we show the form, we perform a query, and then we get the number of features and we assign the largest feature to whichever the first one is. We have a for each that goes through them all, comparing them, and then we tell you which was the largest. And over here we've got a similar thing. We've got a form, we've got a query, we create a value for the largest, we've got a for each, and then we've got an alert. So these are two equivalent workflows. So here I've got a viewer that's going to run both of them in GVH, and I have the network tab open at the bottom here so that we can see what's going on behind the scenes. So first of all, we run the workflow in Essentials. You can see there's our form telling us what it's going to do. I click OK. It takes a moment, and then we can see there's the result. So there were 1,000 features from the query, which is the most you can get back from a query. There's the name of the largest tract, and there's its area. So job done. Oh, notice actually at this point it's showing two requests, and so even after I click OK for that alert at the end of the workflow, there's still one final request that finally comes back and tells us, yeah, the workflow is completed. So the client's completely at the mercy of the server telling it what's happening next, and then it doesn't stop sending it back until it tells it it's finally done. So you can notice the second request here, this time it took to respond was 5.5 seconds, so that's quite slow. And that's where the query was happening, and all the comparison of all of the features. And also notice this, that the request we sent after submitting the alert was actually quite a large request. If I look at the headers here, look at this size of the content. That's what 1972858 bytes. That's huge. In fact, the browser doesn't even want to show me the whole thing. It's truncated. So that's all the state of the workflow, which includes all of the features and all that stuff. So pretty slow there. So now let's clear the console and we'll run it again from the Geocortex workflow and see the difference. So here we can see the appearance of it slightly different. It's over here on the side. We've had a request for an image here. That's more part of GVH than the workflow itself. So there we go, we've got the result already, so that was way faster. We get the same response, so 1,000 features, the largest tract was 9,009, there was its area, exactly the same. And then I click OK and we're done. And so you can see the only network traffic here was that query. So in the case of the first one, the query was done by the server, so it didn't show up in the browser's traffic, but because the Geocortex workflow runs in the browser itself, the browser initiated that query. And even though we were getting back 1,000 features, that still was very quick. It only took 114 milliseconds there. So that was much faster. So that's just a quick example of the difference between these two technologies. I hope that helps illustrate the point. Obviously in a real workflow, things would be much more complicated. You'd have many more steps, and actually the effect might be even more significant. But this was really just a simple example to give you an idea. So thanks very much for your time, and I hope this was useful.